Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Builders of Egypt. So for those on across it, when I do overviews on this channel, I have a look at the first 2 hours of the game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam says you can make up your mind in that time about whether you want to keep the game or not, and I generally agree. As a rule would say 20 hours in, you're probably not going to change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short punchy video, keep around 10 minutes, broad strokes info, and then you can make up your mind on your own. Right, so, this is a bit iffy, okay? To lead out, I don't want to just say that this game is terrible objectively, but it sort of sits in this space that you see more and more, where it is a little bit kind of derivative of its sources. And I feel it should go without saying that if you're going to make a game that draws heavy inspiration on, you know, some sort of predecessor, call it a spiritual successor as it were, you gotta do it better. You gotta bring something to the table, whether it's a twist on the formula or just something. And I suppose the argument for this would be that the graphics are better than something like, the Caesar type games of old. So I've set the scene. I'm not that impressed, to be perfectly honest. And on top of that, it's a little bit broken. In fact, actually, in the ways that it broke, it made me kind of not want to play it. So that's also quite bad. But let's wind the clock back a little bit. So you have these sort of games. They were during my kind of childhood, I guess, but for whatever reason, I never really played many of them. And these are, your old Pharaoh, Caesar, I think Cleopatra, these sort of isometric proto-colony management type games. But they had their own sort of unique quirks about sort of how you box in workers and rudimentary pathing systems for getting people to deliver goods and that sort of thing. I don't want to talk too much specifically on the originals because, like I said, they sit outside of my scope personally. However, there has been a revival of some of them in recent years, and I have grabbed onto them and loved them and carried heavy regret that I never actually played the original games that people grew up on. So the examples that come to mind, Pharaoh: A New Era, which was a Dotemu reimagining of the original from what I understand, and that was excellent. And then another one that's quite near and dear to my heart is Nebuchadnezzar. Now that's a little bit different, that's, Sargon timeline, but regardless, still the sort of underpinning mechanics brought forward into a modern setting. And so the reason I bring up those touchstones is that's clearly been done, right? They've taken the classic formula, they've brought it forward, they've given it a nice clean, dab of paint, and they're both sort of holding to that isometric original view. Nebuchadnezzar a little bit more, let's say, grounded in its graphics, a bit more throwback. Pharaoh New Era is a little bit more artistically, cartoony, but I think both art styles work really well, but they're still very true to the mechanical roots. So a little bit of setup, because what is this game doing? Well, it's full 3D, I guess, Unity engine sort of thing. So maybe it's going for more grand spectacle graphics. However, the fidelity is just not there. It looks rough. I feel like maybe internally the pitch is, it's like Caesar or Pharaoh, but with great modern graphics. And that doesn't work, and I've talked about this a million times. Especially if you're not some AAA billion-dollar game company, you should always go for stylized art over hyper-realism, because this shit's gonna look terrible, probably because you're a small indie company trying to make realistic graphics, and that's okay. Some people just make the deal and go, well, my game's gonna look bad, who cares? That's fine. But give it a couple of years and high-fidelity graphics just age so terribly. Your uncanny valley gets wider and wider. So I feel like maybe there's an internal gaslighting in the dev team going on here, thinking that these graphics are going to blow our socks off, and all I see is like a major misstep when compared to the modern contemporaries that have done more stylized art styles. But the real sin is it's taken almost every mechanic, like it's just lifted everything. Firehouses, architecture posts, bazaars that deliver goods, stockpiles, and generally mechanically, you'll have your floodplains over here. I'm using my hands a bit, to do food, and then it has to go to a stockpile. So like 99% of all the mechanics are there. However, they've taken out like the cornerstone mechanics, which are that you have to put little road blockades to lock in. It's very difficult to describe because it's an old mechanic. It's arguably a kind of dead mechanic, but it is the cornerstone of this genre. And it's what makes it kind of a little bit more of a puzzle to solve. Trying to shepherd your workers in such a way so that they will, like you'll have a water carrier in Pharaoh or something, and they'll go to the water stop and they'll walk around. So they have this rudimentary AI behavior where they follow a path, and you have to put these little road blockers in such a way so as to deliver the goods up and down the streets properly. Again, difficult to illustrate if you've not seen it before, but just trust me, it's a cornerstone of this kind of genre, and arguably what makes it interesting whether you like it or not. So all they've really done here is they've copy-pasted almost everything about the original concept, except the one interesting, unique thing that makes it not just a bland colony builder. And so this is what we're sent with. I know I sound like I'm going hard on it, but I'm just trying to be descriptive and use my words. Saying a game's bad is dismissive. I'm trying to tell you what's wrong here. And it's not something that can be patched. This is obviously a design decision, and I just feel like they needed, more oversight from community or fans. I don't know the background. I stay out of early access dev timelines. I'm not interested in helping you make your game good. I'll just pass judgment on the final product. But yeah, ultimately, it doesn't really do anything new other than maybe having a 3D camera and having modern, in inverted commas, graphics on the Unity engine from a very, very small team. Ergo, I think it looks worse than the other attempts that have been true to the original formula and yet gone for a stylized art decision. That said, it's all subjective, right? You might totally disagree and you think that this looks like $1 million. Another really egregious problem is it seems quite buggy. I've had some sort of issues. The game's very, very strict about tutorializing you, and it's not a show don't tell. It's one of those tutorials where you will put this thing in the exact spot, and it went for like over an hour. Each mission, it would introduce mechanics by doing that. Now, that's not necessarily unique to this game, but I think it's a terrible way to tutorialize because the person comes out the other end having absorbed nothing. It's very dry, and all they're doing is clicking the spot that you tell them to click and not really asking why. There seems to be some sort of immigration system whereby, like, if your unemployment number is over a certain threshold, let's say 1 to 10%, there'll be a negative. 10 to 20%, maybe it's -2. 20% plus is -3. And then you balance this against like desirability within the system, within the city, or like tax rates. My point is that it generates this kind of, I don't know what it's called, but it's sort of just this standard attitude towards your city. And if it hits -3, people are going to start mass leaving in droves. And the way that it telegraphed was that the math didn't add up. I was stuck at -3, and yet even on the pull down, all of my things said it should be in the positive. So it put me into this weird death spiral where people were just mass leaving my city at -3. The math told me my tax rate was good. I paid the people even more in food, which is the fiat currency in this, which then bankrupted me basically. But it was really strange because all of the telegraphs told me I was doing everything right, and then it magically corrected. Now, so maybe there's some sort of decay or hidden mechanic or whatever like that, but the game doesn't telegraph that at all. And like I said, the numbers didn't add up. It was essentially giving me an equation that said 2 + 2 = -3, and I ended up put into an economic death spiral that I couldn't get out of, because once you're in the negative, you can't buy back in. Now look, maybe there's a mechanic there that I've misunderstood, to be generous, but I feel like either it is a bug or they just haven't telegraphed it correctly. Couple that with all the rest. I mean, I'm a bit of a late history buff. I enjoy this sort of stuff. I've mentioned in, Assassin's Creed, for example, one of the small features that people don't realize is that it does a lot of history lesson stuff, photos from museums and that sort of thing. I really quite like that as a boring old man. This game has info dump on Egyptian history at the beginning of a level, but I've never seen quite so much dry, scrollable text ever. Like, it's just terribly delivered. It really is. And I'm the target audience. I'm the guy that looks at it and goes, yeah, I really want to learn all this stuff and be informed about the history little nuggets, but it gives you walls and walls and walls of text with the most dry narrator voiceover. Anyway, again, I'm not trying to bash the game, but I will confess that a part of me is a little bit, miffed that the entire, sales pitch of this is taking 99% of something done previously, pacing it again, pulling out the actual soul that made those games tick, and then, brazenly putting it forward like original product. So yeah, it's kind of hollow. But at the same time, it is a buyer's market. This game has a shitload of follows on it, which is really strange. But if it's organic, so be it. And if it sells, go for it. That's great. Give the people what they want. I just don't, even after all of this, I don't exactly know how to pitch it to you and find you the hypothetical person that wants this game. What I would say is don't worry about it and go and check out Pharaoh: A New Era or Nebuchadnezzar if you are interested in these sort of games, or if you have nostalgia, you probably already have those. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.